You seen the new line of Kamala Harris written Valentine's Day cards? Let me read you one. It says, "It's so crucially important in your life that you have something occur in your lifetime. May that something be the source of the activity of your days. Happy Valentine's Day." Perfect for a current generation. Welcome to Grounded, the place to hear the salty truth. I'm your host, Scott Cates, coming to you live from the Northeast Georgia mountains and the tiny town of Tiger, where today it's kind of gray, overcast, sort of a blah type day. Interesting. I actually have nothing in the pending pile today. I really don't. The whole week I've looked for headlines that might actually be pretty good to talk about, and they're all over the map. Don't get me wrong, there's a ton of things going on, but it's kind of become the norm over the last couple of weeks. So in that, I just thought I'd talk about other things rather than what's going on in the political realm and nationally. Of course, we had Super Bowl, all that stuff yesterday, but it doesn't really matter. I think the thing that's really hit me is that Friday is Valentine's Day. And yeah, my joke at the beginning of the Kamala Harris vague cards, that's pretty much like how a current generation sort of works and moves. You're actually seeing that. That's politically correctness. Let's don't get nailed down on any specifics. Let's just stay in this vague generality. And you see this in relationships. You see this in business relationships especially, but you see it also in relationships. Take its toll. Sometimes you see it in marriages. Sometimes you see it in all of those things. I'm not a vague person. I'm like a black and white, all or nothing, sort of, let's talk about this. Let's, don't leave me guessing. Let's don't get vague here. Last week, I talked about a good friend who was in my life every day. He said, "You're my best friend, and I love you." It was great. There's nothing vague about that. Nothing vague about, hey, you're my very best friend, and I love you. That's basic, plain English. But it's interesting today when you're dealing, and I didn't even think about this. I was in conversation a little bit about this over the past week with folks. How do you deal with the vagueness of what the current day generation has been taught on how to sort of respond with their answers? And so let me give you an example on that for just a second so that you can see kind of what I mean by that. It's so that you don't get nailed down. No specifics. You don't have to get nailed down. And it really comes down to sort of this anxiety that comes from being nailed. I don't want anyone to know where I am, and I don't want, it gives me great anxiety to have to nail this down. And you find this a lot of times with people who are just, that won't tell you how they are or what is going on in their life. And when you ask the questions, it brings them great anxiety and a source of contention in their world. So they just don't want to be nailed down, and they definitely don't want to have to respond. So if you look at some people, we didn't cover this last week, but if you look at some people and you say, "Hey, you're my best friend and I love you," there's great anxiety with the fact that they have to respond to you with a statement that might be similar. Because you don't want to get nailed down. They don't want to get nailed down in that. And not only that, but they've been taught not to be nailed down in some ways, which is interesting to me. So they've been taught how to sort of respond with the politically correct answers that would make Kamala Harris proud, actually. For instance, if you say, let's say you say, "Well, you're my best friend and I love you." Let's say you say this and you use those words. The response back might be, "You're loved. You are loved. Just know you are loved." Now, this is an interesting response. They may not ever say, "Well, hey, you're my friend." They may not get any response, but in a response back, that they might say, "Well, you are loved," which is interesting because in a response like that, it's vague. It's a very vague. They don't want to lie to you and tell you that they really don't feel the same way, or that's not how, that's not them at all. They don't want to lie to you. So rather than lie to you, they use a statement saying, "You are loved." Now, in that statement, it's so vague that what they could mean is someone in your life loves you, your parents love you, your kids love you, they could say anything. Basically, your town loves you, your listeners love you, your dog loves you. But I love you doesn't have to be included in that statement, and they're sure that someone loves you, and it doesn't nail them down. Do you understand? That's what I'm saying there. And so life is filled with these generalities and these general statements. And so today in the current, if you ask a pointed question and you say, I'd love to know, what are your thoughts on this? Usually the first response is, I don't know. Or let me think about that for a little bit to never get back. And when you get to conflict, let's talk about conflict you might get into. And sometimes, by the way, let me explain. And we'll get here. Today I'm talking about the one and only. That's kind of the theme of today. And it really is coming out of a Proverbs 18 theme that's really incredible. Let me get to that as we talk about these things. There's a current generation right now that is raised up in vagueness. They know how to, answer politically correct. Let's don't nail me down. I don't really want to have a specific, it's not necessarily black or white. Truth is a gray area. It may apply to someone else, but my truth is my truth. All of that. And that's been taught through generations. And here on this Valentine's Day, you use hard terms on Valentine's Day. You do. Terms like, I love you. Terms like, you are the one and only. You are the most important person in my life. These are things that are being used on Valentine's Day that will be. So the politically correct Valentine's Day card, Kamala Harris needs to have a line for the current generation where you go and you read and you're trying to pick out that perfect card. I know Valentine's Day is uncomfortable sometimes for people that don't want to stand in the card aisle and try to figure out what exactly is it that you don't want to say. I covered a podcast a couple of years back about men standing in line for the greeting card aisle. It's kind of sort of uncomfortable in some ways for a lot of men to stand in line and find that perfect card that is going to speak to the heart of the individual. So Kamala Harris needs to just come up with her own line of cards. And I've sort of penned one out here just to say it would be perfect for the current generation. That's what I was reading at the beginning. Let me go back through it again. It's so crucially important in your life that you have something occur in your lifetime. May that something be the source of the activity of your days. Happy Valentine's Day. Perfect card for the vague generation, I guess, that is out there. And for those people that just don't really want to say anything, but remain in that sort of, neutral blah kind of realm. I don't know about you. I like clarity. I really do. I love clarity. I like to know. I like to walk into people's lives and look at them and know they truly care. And that you can look back and say, look, I truly care as well. This is important. It's important in relationships. It's important it's important in so many different realms. Most especially important in the close circle of people that are around you, that they know that you care, that you actually use your words to say that you do, and your actions back them up. This is key. Now, we'll talk about this. Proverbs 18, there are a number of things that are in Proverbs 18. Now, I'm not going to try to read through the whole chapter of Proverbs 18. But there is a verse that is here. It says, verse 14, 18:14 says, the spirit of a man will sustain him in sickness, but who can bear a broken spirit? I think there's a fear of the broken spirit, which is why oftentimes people get just vague. I don't want to just sort of make myself vulnerable and say these things. I fear a broken spirit in the process. What does the broken spirit actually mean? Well, it translates out to actually mean the emotional well-being of a man or the emotional well-being of a person. That spirit, and we see this oftentimes at the end of life, a person who's like got the will to live, and then there's the spirit to live, and they just want to do that, and finally at the point that they give up in a short period of time, they don't live for very long. The broken spirit is a very serious thing. As you go through this chapter in Proverbs 18, he talks about the ways. that people sort of deal with each other. He talks about how you use your tongue, how you use your speech. The tongue has the power of life and death. It says life and death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat its fruits, either eating death or life, whatever, in the process of that. So it's important that we use our words honestly to build up, especially in the relationships that we truly do care. And what I'm trying to tell you is that if you really want to pour into a relationship, the most honest that you can be and the less vague you can be, I think, is better. Now, you don't have to expose everything. Don't get me wrong. I was talking about my friend last week, and he was telling me about giving me marriage advice at one point in time, and he had been divorced a couple of times, and he'd given me marriage advice. He said, I'm a very truthful person. I really am, and I use honesty at all times. And he said, in my marriage relationship, I was honest at all times. And he said I was. And he said, but there is a time that maybe you should just close your mouth. For instance, he said, when she comes out and she says, do you like this dress? He said, I'm not a vague person. So I would look up and go, no. And if she said, would you think this dress makes me look fat? And he would say, yes. So things like that, there's a time, maybe learning some tact would be, it's okay, or maybe you should choose something better. She could get the impression without being so, boom, just cut to the heart. I get that. Don't get me wrong. So being careful and tactful and gentle in our responses is important in our relationships. It helps that emotional well-being. It really does. And it basically helps your relationships as well. He said, I didn't stay married a couple of times because I was so brutally honest. I told you everything that I thought. And I'm a person like that. I love to just tell you, this is what's on my mind. This is what's on my heart. But some people cannot deal with that. And what I've learned in a current generation is a lot of times they cannot deal with absolutes. The vague is the realm. If you try to nail them down, it creates great contention to try to nail them down with what they actually feel or think. They don't want to talk about what is going on in their life, and so it brings great contention. You become the source of contention if you actually even ask questions trying to nail that down. By the way, in any relationship, there is going to be some contention if you do care. There are going to be questions that are asked if you do care, and that's important. When we get to the end of Proverbs 18, there are two relationships that are mentioned here that are key. And I want to read these to you because it's Valentine's Day. They are important. Right after death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat its fruit, comes the verse in verse 22. He who finds a wife finds a good thing and obtains favor from the Lord. Now, this verse is an amazing verse because the idea of he who actually finds a wife. This is it's sort of like a challenge in the fact that actually finding that one and only that's going to come into your life, and kids can go either way. Finding that one and only is important. Any relationship that you're going to be, especially that's going to be that close. And it's interesting, to be honest with you, the fact that God made a man and he made a woman, and they are completely opposite. They talk completely different. They communicate completely different. And he said, I'm going to put you together and you're going to live together. Now, that is quite the challenge in some moments. And communication does have to take place. And there are some times that you have to absolutely get to absolutes. Honesty is a good thing. And being able to look at each other and honestly say, hey, you are my one and only. Honestly say, I do love you. Honestly say, man, I'm so glad that we're together. These things, these truths are so important. And they're important to be spoken to each other. This Valentine's Day, take some time. If you've been living in the vague, this Valentine's Day, I encourage you to step out of the vague for a little bit, look each other in the eye, and say these words. I love you. You're my one and only. I'm so glad you're in my life. Communicate these things To be left in the vague is not good. If you're going to take your wife out to dinner, gentlemen, take her out to dinner and pay attention. Get off your phone, actually have some conversation. Tell her why she's important to you and the one and only. Ladies, do the same for your husband. At the same time, this is important. Why? Because earlier, the spirit of the man, the spirit that's inside of an individual that is there. It's kind of interesting, that phrase, the spirit of the man. It's the place that where praise and singing truly come from. So when there's joy of the heart, it's the place where joy, this praise and singing come from that place. When the emotional well-being of a person is where it is joyful and happy, praise and singing come there. When a spirit is broken, it is very difficult to praise and sing. Very difficult to make the sound sing, which is why blues music, the blues, you look at that and you look at the downtrodden, oftentimes there are songs that are written after the fact about those times. But the truth is that the overflowing of the heart in joyful times, you'll see singing occur. And you don't have to be a good singer. It's a joyful noise that is being made. I raised 4 children when they were very young. They sat around the table at dinner time, and they would all hum. They would hum different songs, but while they were eating, there's that little happy, joyful heart having something as they're filling their bellies right there, and they're singing with this joyful sound around the table, all different songs, but all humming. My wife and I would point out to each other, we would say, listen to that, as they'd make these joyful sounds of singing around the table while they ate. Happy kids. I've known people that have stopped that singing at the table. Be quiet. Stop that. I encourage you, don't do that. Man, let your kids sing. In the moments that they're happy, let them sing. Let them express that joy. They don't even know they're doing it. It's a second nature point that is actually happening. The spirit of the man, those moments of that joyful and happy spirit, which feed into their lives. It's important. This verse of the fact that he who finds a wife finds a good thing and obtains favor from the Lord. Understand this today if you're listening to this podcast. If you have a spouse that is in your life, that is there, that is with you, that loves you in spite of all of your faults and differences and things that your traits and characteristics that you think are less than desirable to you, your own. And you love them in spite of, that's a part of the things that you love about them are their characteristics. That's not easy to do, to fall in love with the characteristics that you may think at some point in your life you don't like. But love, honestly, goes beyond. Love is something that happens at all costs. We'll talk about that in just a second. But when you love someone, you love their faults as well. I know some of you are like, wait a minute, are you kidding me? How can we do that? How do you love their faults? If you don't love their faults will become your source of contention endlessly. Now, I'm not talking about they're running out there and, in love with everybody else but you. I'm not talking about that. What I'm talking about is just the simple things that you could nitpick each other to death. Let those go. Matter of fact, take a moment where you can stop and look up and go, you know what? That kind of makes them precious. It's pretty interesting. One of you may be spontaneous. One of you may be detail-oriented that has to have the schedule posted out. And the two of you, it drives you nuts to get together because one has to be planned out, one has to be spontaneous. But the truth of the matter is that the both of you coming together, you force them to go and break their schedule, and they need to bring that schedule to your life in moments. And it actually is not a bad combination. Learning to love at all costs. All of it makes them precious. That's important. He who finds a wife finds a good thing and obtains favor from the Lord. Gentlemen, let me say this to you today. If you are married and you have found a wife, and I don't care what season of life you actually are in, whether you're married a year or you've been married 60, that wife you have is a good thing. And you obtain favor from the Lord because he's put into your life that one and only. By the way, it's important. She's the one and only. By the way, ladies, he's the one and only. That's important in your life to make sure that that is the case. Settle there. That's important. And then verse 24. Because Valentine's Day, even though it is about quote unquote love, for instance, as far as the culture is concerned and all of those things, it's been a beefed up holiday based on Hallmark. I get it. Verse 24 says, a man who has friends must himself be friendly. This is a statement. A man who has friends must himself be friendly. Now, I think defining what friendly actually is will come to the next part. And it says, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. When you go and you define the friend right here in the line that says, there's a friend who sticks closer than a brother, that word friend right there literally translates out in the Hebrew to mean love, pure, true human love that loves at all cost, willing to give their entire life for you. There is a friend that sticks closer than a brother. They love at all cost. We see this friendship throughout Scripture. We see it especially in the life of David, King David, that David and Jonathan, Saul's son Jonathan, who were knit at the soul. They loved being together. There's a being knit at the soul. When they were separated from one another, they grieved over the fact that they were far apart. When they came back together, they loved being together. Jonathan comes out when Saul seeks David's life, and he warns his friend because he cannot even fathom the idea that he would lose his friend. And so therefore, Jonathan puts his life on the line and protects David's life. And the love that they have for each other as a friendship is so incredibly amazing. One gives, another gives. And the truth is that friendship is amazing like it is because the best friends that they are, they love at all costs. It's not conditional. It's not just, and see, today's current generation, I think, of friendships oftentimes are made up of friendships. As long as I feel good about you, I'm good. As long as you got something to offer me, I'm good. But man, if contention comes in or you create anxiety in my life or you create discontentment in my life, you're gone. Gone in a heartbeat. Don't want you anymore. Don't want you near me. Get away from me. Get away from me, boy, you bother me. That kind of thing. That sort of mentality. Listen, folks, true, genuine, heartfelt, absolute friendship comes no matter what the season is in your life. It is. It does. And to be honest, in that true and genuine friendship, very much like the spouse that you have, you're going to go through seasons, and you are. And I've had people argue with me at this. I was in a men's retreat one time. I was teaching a men's retreat. I said, how many of you, have faced, moments in your marriage that were very serious? And every man raised their hand but one. He said, I've been married 55 years. I've never had a difficult time in my life. And my response was, one of you's lying. I mean, seriously, because if you're going to be married, there are seasons that are going to be difficult. And the truth is, usually the person that says, I've never had a difficult time is because the other one has covered up everything to make sure that that's not the case. And usually when you get into the conversation with the other one, you'll find out they're actually kind of miserable at that point because they don't feel like anyone's listening or has ever considered them. A man who has friends must himself be friendly. There's a two-way street that goes with that. You must be a friend to have friends. And vice versa in the relationship. It's a give-give. Just like in your marriage relationship, it's a give-give. And of course, we've known for years and years it's not about 50%. I give 50%. You really just give 110% no matter what. And I promise you, when you set out to actually make their day, and that's what you do. How can I relieve some pressure? How can I off of you? How can I take care of you? What are you going through in life? What can I do to really ease what it is that you're going through? I can't stand to see you in the place that you're in right now. So what can I do to raise your countenance? As iron sharpens iron, a man sharpens the countenance of his friend. What can I do to sharpen up your countenance? In your marriage relationship, what can I do to sharpen your countenance and raise that? So I could see that smile come once again. So I could see that light come once again behind the eyes. In friendships that are difficult, when you're going through seasons of whatever it is, when you reach a point where maybe you're the friend and you're going through a difficult time, or they're the friend and they're going through a difficult time, just because they go through difficult times doesn't mean you just shake them off. When it says that there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother, that's the friend that gets in the hole with you. That's a friend that climbs into the darkness with you and sits by your side and says, I'm not leaving you no matter what. I don't care what you throw at me. I'm not leaving you no matter what. It's okay. That's the friend also at the same time that sometimes looks up and says, wait a minute, hold on. Have I become your source of contention? If I'm the source of contention as a friend because of the way that I've been, maybe I need to step away here for just a second and pull myself together so that I'm not your source of contention, because I don't want to be that. That also is friendship as well. But it's not losing each other over a period of time. I've had friends that I've been that have lived geographically farther than away from me, hours away, halfway across the world, whatever. And you get back with them, and those friends, you know what I'm talking about, those friends that you sit down with, you haven't seen in 3 or 4 years, and you just strike up that conversation, and you're right back where you were. Those are the kind of friends that are amazing. But what I can tell you is this. It's important that the friends that are close to you, and to be honest, let me say this. If you are the luckiest individual in the world where your spouse is also your best friend, and by the way, you may not believe that they are, but they truly are. If they love you through the trials of life and they're there for you and they want the best for you, they truly are your best friend. And it's amazing because there's 50 million things out there in the culture that'll try to get you to believe something different. Don't believe it. The ones who truly love you, they will be with you through the difficult times. The ones who truly love you, they will step up, and they'll be the ones that don't want to see you go when you do go. The ones that truly love you will actually miss you when you're not there. There'll be some sort of missing, which is so incredibly important, because that's what love does. It longs. That's what long suffering is all about. Love suffers long. Until you can be back in each other's presence, and love suffers long. There's something to be said about long suffering. And I'm not talking about patience. I'm talking about the fact that you suffer until that person comes back. Or you've lost sight of the person maybe that you once knew, and you suffer until that person comes back. That's what I mean. Love is amazing. And I can go into the love chapter. I don't need to do that. I've done that before today. But as we discuss the emotional well-being today, the spirit of a man, there are some things that affect his spirit and her spirit. Number one, the people that are closest to you. It's interesting because the people that are the closest to you in your life, they also affect your emotional well-being. They just do. Let me say this today. If things are not right in your closest relationship, whatever that is, set it right. If you're a person that really just can't handle conflict in some way or whatever, set it right. Honestly, get the clarity out there, get it done, and move on. It'll be better if you clarify and move on than to hang on to it for, say 3 to 4 years and never say a word. That's the reason why you've set that. As a matter of fact, if you continue, if you look at verse 19 in Proverbs 18, it says, "A brother offended is harder to win than a strong city, and contentions are like the bars of a castle." And I want to kind of talk about that today. If there is contention between you in your relationship, no matter what it is, whether it's a friendship, whether it's your marriage relationship, whatever, understand that it's like the bars of a castle. At first, those bars are sort of fragile. You can actually resolve that, and you can literally get that resolved, and it's great. But if you don't get that resolved, let's say the bars are originally made of basically sand. They're bars that are made of sand that has hardened a little bit that you can push through and get through if you resolve the conflict. But if you don't resolve the conflict, those bars will become hardened steel, and they'll be what you look through at each other that keep you apart from one another. I encourage you, resolve the conflict today. Whatever's in the way, stop it. Take the moment today. If you're at conflict with someone who is close to you in your world or whatever, if someone is brought to your mind while I'm talking about this on this Valentine's Day week, reach out. Reach out and stop and say, "Hey, whatever is between us, let's put that behind us." Look, tear those bars down, ladies and gentlemen, honestly. Those bars that you look through that keep you apart from each other, tear those bars down. Lay that down. Put it to the side. Be the first one to step up. And even maybe you might not be the one who did the offending. But to be honest with you, just to step up and say, "You know what? I don't want to be apart anymore. I want to reach out once again and reach into your world and tell you that I miss you and I love you. And you're an important part of my life." Now, this is very hard for a vague generation sometimes because I'm not talking about writing someone and saying you're missed. Listen, there's a difference in saying I miss you and I love you. There's a difference in that. I'm not talking about saying, well, just know that you're missed. Well, somebody in the world probably misses you. I'm not talking about saying, hey, by the way, you're loved. Somebody in the world might love you. No, you need to say, it's me that misses you. It is me that loves you. It is me that cares about you. It is me that wants you in my world. This is crucial, and it is. I don't know when the last time you sat down with your spouse and just looked into their eyes and said, "You mean the world to me. I'm so glad that you're in my life. I love you. And to spend my days with you is amazing. You are my one and only, and you always will be." To sit down with your friend that is close to you, your best friends, and to sit with them and say, "You know what? I'm so glad that you're in my life, that you are my best friend. I don't want you to know that. Nobody else has walked into my life and been what you are to me. My life is richer because you are in it, and I want you to know that." I promise you, by the end of this week, if you'll move to that realm, it'll make a huge difference in your life if there's something in the way in any relationship. So there are two that are, by the time you get to Proverbs 18. Now, to be honest with you, there is, in Proverbs, it talks about mothers and fathers and families and all of that. But there are two in the emotional well-being of individuals that are important. That spouse is important. Not good for man to be alone. God says that we created a spouse and brought them in. That's by the favor of the Lord that took place. Make sure that they know that your life is not just richer, but you have the favor of the Lord because God has placed them in your world, and they are the one and only. And the second in that emotional well-being of the relationship is the friend. The man who has friends must himself also be friendly. Let me encourage you to be friendly. lay back a little bit on the vague in your friendships. I'm talking about, to be honest with you, answer. Use your words that we talk about the time. Actually answer. Let your actions follow up your words with both your spouse and your friends. Use your words. Don't kill people to death with 1 to 3 word statements. Actually speak a phrase that makes sense. I'm not talking about the Kamala Harris phrase. I'm talking about phrases that make sense, that not open-ended, but that are concrete, that they know, that they mean everything to you, and that God has placed them in your life and you in theirs, and you love the fact that they are there. Man, it's Valentine's Day this Friday. It blows my mind. First part of the year is just going like wildfire right now. It was like January sort of crept through slow. February is blowing by. But I encourage you by the end of this week, those people that are the one and only in your life, spouses, best friends, those people that are the one and only, let them know that they are and that they mean so much to you. Like I said, didn't have much in the pending pile today, but I felt like this was important. I took a group yesterday through Proverbs 18. What an amazing chapter. We came through it, came to the end of it, and I think many of us were just cut to the heart over it. Finally, when it comes down to it, what does all of this require? Well, it requires some things that are beyond your control. That's the thing, I think, and the reason why vagueness is taught is so that you can be the one in control. Usually a person that is very vague is the one who is trying to control. They're the ones who are control. They have control over their life. And they control by not be getting nailed down at all. And they maintain that control because they're in the power and control of their life. So it's going to require something that is important. It's going to require some mercy and some grace. Matter of fact, the person who is truly a friend that loves and a spouse that loves is going to be merciful and graceful with their answers and honest in their answers. They're going to be gentle with their requests. That's important. And finally, they're going to come in all of this from a place of humility, which is not going to be about their control. It's going to be about the fact that they recognize God has placed these people in their life. So as a result, they say the things that they do with humble hearts and a sweet spirit. And when these things come out and the actions to follow, it's powerful. Finally, on Valentine's Day, one of the things that's done oftentimes, especially between spouses, is they give each other a gift. The gift is important, and a gift actually is, it actually opens doors oftentimes where doors have been shut or closed. It's like when you go to someone's house, it used to be customary, you'd bring a gift when you walked into someone's house that would sort of break the ice, that you were not a burden to them, but that they meant much to you. The giving gifts to each other means that you mean something to me, and that's an action that is followed. Now, I'm not talking about spiritual gifts. I'm just talking about the fact that you gave them a gift that you knew would mean a lot. Something that may mean, and it may be something that means, that is uniquely about them, whatever. But the bringing of a gift opens a door in a relationship oftentimes. It's not a bribe. I'm not talking about that. It's the fact that you cared enough for them that you brought them a gift. Now, I understand. Oftentimes people take it today, especially with the current generation of minimalists just throws it all in the closet. Doesn't really matter. Let's just toss it to the side, pitch it to the, thank you. And they just toss it to the side. It doesn't really mean much. I get it. But for those of you that love seriously with all of your heart, The giving of that gift does represent something about you, and it is important because it means it's not all about you. That gift means it's been about them. And whether they could care less or not does not really matter. You cared. That does matter. So on this Valentine's Day, that spouse of yours, whatever little gift that it is, maybe that you might get for them on Valentine's Day that says, I do love you. It means a lot. The gift, actually, and the gifts that are given out of love do mean a great deal. Now, it is soul-crushing in moments when you discover that those gifts that you went to great detail and you spent your time putting together and that you gave to someone, they just cast it to the side like an old shoe or a worn-out piece of chewing gum. That's not fun. But at least you cared enough to give that gift, though they did not care. Because some people don't know how to receive, especially current generation doesn't really know much on how to receive well. And that's okay. At least they know they're cared for. And that is important. So today, I'm talking to you about traditions, and these are age-old traditions, by the way, that, I'm again in Proverbs 18, a man's gift makes room for him. It opens up the door. The man's gift makes room for him in someone's life. That's important. We've been given spiritual gifts, and I'll say this too, to build up the church. And that's important. We use those according to God. And those spiritual gifts open the door so that people will accept Jesus. Those spiritual gifts open the door so that people will stay walking with Jesus. They are important. Yes. But the gift is important. It does open the door. Oftentimes. So remembering, being thoughtful and remembering is important. And to be honest with you, when I said this, I think last week, a man will give to those he cares about. And if you look and all a person is doing is actually taking care of themselves, that'll tell you what they care about. And going back down to where it says, in order for a man to be a friend, he must be friendly. Well, just a part of being friendly. I don't know where you are today, but I encourage you by the close of this week, look at those you care about deeply. Look at those that are in your close circle for sure. Look at your children and tell them how much they mean to you. Look at your family, tell them how much they mean to you. Look in the face of your spouse and tell them what they mean to you. And look in the face of your best friends and tell them that your life is so much richer because they are in it. And I promise you, it brings about a beautiful, beautiful friendship and relationship unlike you've ever known. And for those of you that are so incredibly blessed in your life to have your spouse as your best friend, and whether you know it or not, they actually are, then you're blessed anyway. Don't forget it. Remember it. By the way, happy Valentine's Day. Don't be vague. Be specific. And tell them exactly what they mean to you. You've been listening to Grounded, the place to hear the salty truth. Valentine's Day is 4 days away. What does all this mean? Well, when it comes down to it, we love, according to 1 John, we love because he first loved us. We know how to love if we're a believer in Jesus Christ. If you do not know Jesus Christ as Savior and Lord of your life, you can stop right where you are today. Ask Jesus for forgiveness of your sins because they are what stands in the way between you and him. And ask him to come in, forgive you of your sins, and cleanse you today of those things so that you can walk with him from that day forward and he can guide you. That's important. And I promise you, you'll learn about a love that's amazing. Secondly, today, What about you? If you're listening to this podcast, and many of you may be listening to this podcast, if the idea behind this is it makes you feel a little bit uncomfortable, it's okay. It can. If you think the idea behind what I'm saying is a betrayal to yourself in doing that, unfortunately, that might tell you a little bit about you as well. Because when it comes down to the relationships I'm talking about, listen to me carefully, they are selfless. If you're a believer in Jesus and you're having a hard time really coming around and trying to tell someone what they truly mean to you in your life, stop. Put the selfishness aside. Let it become selfless and unconditional love, and allow God to move in that. And if you're having trouble, stop and pray where you are and say, Lord, please help me here to become selfless with an unconditional love so that I build this relationship rather than keep it behind bars. Thanks for listening today. Happy Valentine's Day to you. I hope you guys have a great week, and I hope things are amazing for you. See you next Monday.